Jimmy Kimmel's show has been pulled indefinitely by ABC because of comments he made about the Charlie Kirk matter. Many have asked, can they do that? Well, yes, they can, depending on what his contract says. But what about the First Amendment? Well, as I ask people to say many times on my live, what are the first 5 words of the First Amendment? Congress shall make no law. ABC is not Congress. ABC is not necessarily bound by the First Amendment. They are protected by the First Amendment, but they aren't Congress. And as an aside, the First Amendment has been applied to the states via the 14th Amendment by the Supreme Court. Let's take a step back, though. What did Jimmy Kimmel say? I'm not going to read it, but here it is. You can pause to read. And you can pause to read this too. There are issues, though. People within the government have said that anybody who said something derogatory or celebrated the passing of Charlie Kirk should be fired from their jobs. The president celebrated Kimmel being put on hiatus. And Attorney General Pam Bondi has said she will absolutely go after anyone engaged in hate speech. That's probably a specific discussion for another time. The Supreme Court has actually talked about governmental officials quelling free speech by suggesting that companies shouldn't do business with somebody and expand that to somebody being fired. It's called National Rifle Association versus Vullo, and it's from 2024. What's the case about? The New York State Department of Financial Services, under the leadership of Maria Vullo, initiated an investigation into NRA-endorsed insurance programs suspected of violating New York law. 3 companies acknowledged their fault through consent decrees in 2018. After the Parkland school incident, Vullo issued guidance and statements encouraging banks and insurers to assess and potentially end their affiliations with gun promotion organizations like the NRA, citing constitutional risks. Several firms did, and the NRA sued. What was the issue before the court? Does a New York regulator's discouragement of companies from doing business with the NRA after Parkland constitute coercion in violation of the First Amendment? That's pretty on point to what we're talking about. The question here would be, does a federal government employee's discouragement of companies from doing business with individuals who said things the government doesn't like about Charlie Kirk constitute coercion in violation of the First Amendment? The NRA case was unanimous, and the opinion of the court was written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor. The court said that the NRA plausibly alleged that the New York State Department of Financial Services violated the First Amendment by coercing regulated entities to terminate their business relationships with the NRA in order to punish or suppress the NRA's gun promotion advocacy. Government officials cannot use state power to punish or suppress disfavored speech, the court said. The question is whether the government officials' actions could reasonably be understood as a threat of adverse consequences aimed at coercing a private party to punish or suppress someone else's speech on the government's behalf. Factors to consider include the official's regulatory authority, the language and tone of the communications, how they were perceived, and whether they referred to adverse consequences. So, in a similar case, the Supreme Court would look to whether the government officials' statements satisfied those requirements. Are they meant to punish people? Do those people have the ability to punish people? Certainly the Attorney General would have a broad authority to make lives difficult for those who didn't comply. So, while ABC can absolutely put Kimmel's show on hiatus, considering contractual obligations, of course, Kimmel could have some recourse against government officials who said that it should be done if those governmental officials had the power to take some adverse action against ABC. There's also a big issue with the government letting go employees for what they said, for exercising their rights to free speech. So a Marine who was dismissed, teachers potentially who are dismissed, who work for public school districts, all of them could have recourse against the government. For private employers, it's much more difficult. They're not bound by the First Amendment generally, and often they can fire employees for pretty much whatever reason they want.